Welcome to Drinking on the Edge. I am its host, David Fuhrer. Joining me in the studio here at Radio Free Rhinecliff today is its founder and the show's co-producer, Matty Rosenberg. With us for his third time up as co-host is noted drinks professional, Carlo DeVito. Welcome, Carlo.
Thank you.
We are here today on the last day of May with a grape variety that has built a reputation slowly from one corner of the wine universe, but we're not going to be focusing so much on where that wine and grape hails from. Instead, we're going to look how that grape, Albariño, has made itself known on the U.S. West Coast in different forms, in different producers, in all three of those West Coast states that are well known to produce fine wines of all types. Joining us to talk about Albariño is no less than four winemakers. Joining us from California, we have Marimar Torres. Welcome, Marimar.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
And a bit of her background is that the name might sound familiar to you. She's been involved in the wine business all of her life. Hammoud Estate Vineyards and Wineries. She directs all the activities and in the vineyards in Sonoma County's Russian River Valley and Sonoma Coast AVAs. She planted in 1986 the Don Miguel Vineyard, which now encompasses 81 acres. Her dedication to wine business, which she's done all her life in many capacities and in her native Spain, expands to other pursuits as she's an authority on Spanish cuisine with the books The Spanish Table, The Cuisines and Wines of Spain, and The Catalan Country Kitchen. Shows the importance of cuisine with wines. She lives in California, in Sausalito, and at her Russian River Valley vineyard. Her hobbies include spending time with her daughter, Christina, who is also very much involved in the winery. Perhaps someday we'll hear from her talking about your wines in a different capacity, Marimar.
I would love that, and me too.
Of course. Now, we have another California outpost here in the form of Ian Brand. Welcome, Ian. He started his eponymous winery in 2008 with 8 barrels. The winery has grown organically to the equivalent of over 600 barrels of wine in a converted warehouse located in South Salinas. He focuses exclusively on the mountains and valleys surrounding the Monterey Bay, 100 miles south of San Francisco, with the intent of developing the wines and winemaking styles that will allow that region to flourish. So you're a Monterey guy.
Yeah, Monterey, San Benito County, a little bit of South Santa Clara County, and the Southern Santa Cruz Mountains, all around the bay here.
Beautiful place. Yeah, it's pretty spectacular.
The next state north, we have Greg Jones of Abacela Winery. Hello, Greg.
Hello, David. Thanks for having me.
Greg, he's a world-renowned wine climatologist with whom I've had the pleasure of attending many presentations and lectures he's done, working with him in some capacities at conferences that I've directed. He and I have a history there going back to, I think it's 2006?
2005, maybe.
Oh, in Spain it was. In Spain.
Yeah.
So he's held research and teaching positions at multiple universities for over 25 years. His research has firmly linked weather and climate with grapevine growth, fruit chemistry, and wine characteristics in regions all around this earth. His work is also one of the first to tie climate change to fundamental biological phenomena in vines and the resulting influences on productivity and quality. His groundbreaking work has informed and influenced the wine industry. Greg also has lifelong ties to the Oregon wine community. He just mentioned he served for years on the board of the IPNC, soon to be defunct. He's currently the chair of the Oregon Wine Board. That's quite a title there. And he was appointed CEO of his family winery and vineyards at Abacela in 2021. Check him out at climateofwine.com. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And pushing to the northern reaches of the continental U.S., we have Justin Michaud of Coyote Canyon Winery. Hello, Justin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, he got involved in wine first in Santa Cruz, California, where I have some connections as well in the form of my father. But there, Justin, he spent 3 years working in a multitude of vineyards. There's some great ones there, to be sure. He moved to Washington State in 2002 and transitioned from grape growing to wine making. And his path took him to a few other wineries where he worked his way from being a cellar rat to an actual winemaker. Has worked harvest in Australia, New Zealand, and of course, varying places in the U.S. He joined Coyote Canyon in 2013 and has been enjoying working with the estate vineyard ever since. So that's our crew. Thanks for coming. Carlo, do you want to start us off with a question, or what about Albariño?
Albariño to me is a really fascinating grape. It's certainly something that I don't want to preempt or jump some of the questions that you have in the itinerary for our conversation, but it's a pretty versatile grape, and I'm really surprised both on the East Coast and the West Coast, the breadth of what it's able to grow in. On the East Coast, it grows everywhere from Rhode Island down to Virginia. And here on the West Coast, it goes everywhere from Washington State all the way down through California. So it's a pretty versatile grape in that way, although I know it has some of its own challenges in the vineyard, depending on where you're at. So I'm going to be really excited to talk to folks about that. And of course, it's gaining ground in a really big way. And I'm seeing it planted more and more around the United States.
That's great to know. For our guests, why Albariño? And how does it fit into your portfolio and support the other wines that you do?
I decided to bring over the Spanish varietals Albariño, Tempranillo, and mainly Godello because of my connection with Spain. And I started in 2005. But the first Albariño I made was in 2010, and it has been very well received. It's floral, and it's really, I always call it yummy. It's just a delight to taste at any time of the day.
We, about 15 years ago, were working on a theory that one of the reasons the Salinas Valley was not respected as a wine growing region, despite fairly expansive vineyards, was that the right kind of varieties, the right lenses weren't there in order to see place. And we identified bright acid, aromatics, salinity, and minerality as like the holy, I guess it's not a trinity, it's a, what if there's four? It's a
Quartet.
quadrinity.
Yeah, quartet is good enough.
The holy quartet of the area. And we're looking for varieties that sort of channeled those qualities. And as we were looking around for what was already in the ground, we found this great 5-acre Albariño block that was being made as what we refer to as secret Chardonnay, going in with giant truckloads of Chardonnay. And the grower, who thought a great deal of the quality of the grapes and really encouraged us to start working with just a few tons initially. And within 3 or 4 years, we were taking the whole block.
It's worked out well for you. What year was that?
2011 was our first vintage. And I think it was 13 or 14 where we're taking the whole block. Oh. But it's...
Then I'll turn it over to Justin. Justin, Coyote Canyon is known for being, I believe, the first in Washington State for having stuck its neck out with Albariño, previous to your signing on, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have kind of an interesting history with Albariño because we started as a vineyard company solely and then developed into a winery. So our owner, Michael Andrews, when he was initially starting to transition from, he was a cattleman and growing some other crops into grape growing, he started to taste more wines and became interested in what am I growing, what different wines are out there. And he got turned on to some of these Spanish varietals, and Albariño was one that he really enjoyed. And we have 1.89 acres of Albariño. We were maybe the first here in Washington State, and we're seeing a lot of growth in this SKU and this product in Albariño. And we're just at that stage where we're looking at replanting some varietals and adding different things. But yeah, we've always had just like massive success with this Albariño. And for me, it was like an interest to come work here at Coyote Canyon.
I think the most complicated and interesting and formidable involvement with Albariño might come from our next guest, Greg. Give us some background as to Abacela's commitment to this grape variety.
Sure. Thanks, David. I think before I talk about Abacela, I want to make sure that we get back to talk about Albariño's history in America.
Oh.
But my father was very keen on growing grapes and making wine in the early 90s. He was challenged by the fact that America really missed the boat on most Spanish and Portuguese varieties. And his whole entire interest was Tempranillo, but Albariño was always there, but there just wasn't much happening with Albariño in the United States. And those two varieties today make up our marquee production. We have almost 13 acres of Albariño, and we're about ready to plant 5 more in the next couple of years. We have a few different clones, and that's an important thing to talk about in terms of history as well. But we've had Albariño in the ground since 2000. So we have 24-year-old vines today in one block. And then we have multiple other clones in other blocks as well.
Big fan of Abacela. I was there, and I think you guys do an amazing job with it. And I spent a lot of time at your winery when I was on my stroopwafel back in those days, and I did a whole piece on you guys.
Thanks, man.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I love Abacela wines, and like for me, I've been in Washington 20 years. You're like a benchmark for Albariño and Spanish varietals in the Pacific Northwest. So every year here at Coyote Canyon, a goal of ours is to taste Abacela's new Albariños.
High praise indeed. Marimar had made a passing mention about the organoleptic characteristics of Albariño. Can we hear from everybody? It's your perspectives on what the consumer should, if they've never tasted Albariño, what they should expect in general terms.
I guess it's specific a little bit to each site in each region. I oftentimes, like, my go-to descriptor for Albariño in our region is this vein where it's in between a Pinot Grigio and a Sauvignon Blanc. You get some really interesting aromatics. Marimar mentioned a little bit of floral notes. I find like our, in particular, site up here in Washington is a warm site. So we're growing our Albariño in one of the warmer places here in Washington. So our site is a little bit different from a lot of the rest of Washington that we're seeing, maybe some cooler sites. So we get a lot of that stone fruit, peach pear, but there is a vein of like tropical fruit coming into our Albariño. And then that Sauv Blanc. I mean, it's great acidity, right? So it just makes a really nice balanced wine. And I think that's a nice appeal for people, that you're getting this sweet fruit, but it's not sweet wine. It's not too acidic. It's not too dry. So I think it's just got a really broad audience that will enjoy this varietal.
Not dry. I actually haven't tasted any Albariño that wasn't totally dry. You like it that way?
So we actually we make a sparkling Albariño. We do one in stainless steel, and we would do one in concrete. The stainless steel fermentation that I do usually ends up around 1%, between 5 to 10 grams residual sugar. And then the concrete version I allow it to go as dry as it will get, 1-2 grams per liter residual sugar. So there's a little bit of residual in our stainless steel version. You guys are all bone dry?
Yeah.
So we also vinify half in concrete eggs and half in the stainless steel. See the blend of them.
Like you only create the one Albariño?
Yes, just one.
Yeah.
You don't make that much, about 1,200 cases a year, depending on the year.
Going back to some of the organoleptic characteristics, I just think it's a spectacular grape. You can get a lot of variation from citrus characteristics and even some green apple that tends to shine in some years. But I call it my zingy wine. It just has a zingy characteristic to it. The acid is very bright and lively, and it's just so much fun. But going back to what you guys were talking about as well, we make two different styles of Albariño. We do one that is 100% stainless, and then we do another which about 20% of the fruit spends 7 days in acacia barrels. And then it gets blended back with the stainless, and we call that our private selection. And so that has a tendency to have a little bit more rounded mouthfeel, just a hint of that wood characteristic. But both of those wines are just so much fun and lively. I really look forward to every year seeing how it comes out in the bottle.
I have to say one thing about the grape is that it does, number one, again, I repeat all the things you folks have already said. It's got that lovely floralness. It's got that zippy acidity that everybody loves. It's got great fruit. But the fun thing is it's a pretty versatile grape. I've seen it done in oak. I've seen it done, of course, in the stainless steel, which is the most popular version of it. I've even seen several pet nats, which have been absolutely spectacular. So it's a grape that really can be played with. And it's that wonderful sort of thing where you can have Sauvignon Blanc, but I think this grape shows just a little bit more fruit and a little bit more fun.
I think we are, even though we're the furthest south, we're probably of the four of us, the coolest planting of Albariño, owing to the openness to the Pacific Ocean, the onshore flows. And so ours does lean a bit more towards that like peach blossom, jasmine flower aromatics, salinity, and that kind of wet rock minerality. Our block is on a calcareous site, so we have this really fine grain minerality on it. And then we do run a third of it with 2 days of skin contact. And because we're in that ocean breeze, we have thicker skins. And so you really get a lot of that apricot characteristic out of that. And it really lends some beautiful texture. And then we do something we call our alt cut, which is we pull 3 barrels of that skin contact portion. And we barrel ferment those, and then I'm aging them in barrel for 7 months. And then another 5-6 months before release.
In as much as you are farther south, Ian, I thought it'd worth we open your wines first. We'll work our way north from there. So we're tasting now your 2023.
Sure. Yeah, 2023 was a really great vintage here. It was surprisingly cold. We picked Albariño end of September, I think September 28th in 2023.
If someone's never tasted it, are there other grape varieties it might resemble? Historically, there was some talk for a while there about it was brought over by monks from Germany, and it could have been Riesling at one time. That was been that's proven to be false. However, the latest research, I checked with Jose Villamos, a recent guest of ours, there is some confirmed link with Petit Mansang, but again, that hasn't been fully borne out. But in as much as other than Sauvignon Blanc, what other grape varieties might it resemble if someone, again, has never had it before?
Maybe Lorento from time to time, depending on how ripe that is.
I also make some Orento down here. It's less like that. It's maybe a less obscure reference than Orento, but still obscure. It reminds me a touch of Sauvignon.
Yes, Sauvignon, yeah.
Yeah, in the way it presents.
For me, we start to grow Godello, which most people don't know what that is. And I feel that the Godello is, with the florality and that honeysuckle and the star jasmine and Asian pear, right? Characteristics, and then the Chardonnay. So the Godello has some personality of Albariño as well. And I love the stone fruit, like white peach, right? And it just, to me, it's like a perfect every moment wine, and just refreshing and cool and perfect for this time of the year. Where right here it's pretty warm.
What it shares with Albariño, of course, is its geographical origin. They're both Galician wines. And Albariño, of course, is understandably and inextricably linked with Rias Baixas. But Godello, of course, has its feet a little bit east, away from the coast.
Yeah.
There you are.
So, David, I have something to add a little bit on this Tian kind of northern Portugal connection. I've done some research with people at the Mission Biologica in Pontevedra. And I looked at data from there for grape growing and climate. And Rias Baixas is not as cool as everybody makes it out to be. It's actually quite a bit warmer. And the flexibility from the coastal zones there to the slightly inland zones is exactly what we're seeing from Washington down to Salinas.
I have a story about that.
Please.
When I was living in Spain, I came to live here in 1975. And before that, you wouldn't find Albariño in Spain. It wasn't very good at all. Yeah. You would find it only in Galician restaurants, and it was cloudy, and you would have it in a cup. So it was terrible. And then at some point later on, I went to Galicia with my daughter, and hey, there was some pretty good Albariños. And I thought, Galicia is cold and humid, so hey, we'll do well here in the western coast, and which is cool and, of course, and rainy. So I took the carrying through vein. Don't ask me how. That's a secret. And brought them over and started planting over there. And after 3 years, I realized that it was not ripening. So I realized that cool in Rias Baixas and cool in California is quite different. Yeah. So then after seeing that, I had to take the cuttings from the Western Coast Vineyard and brought them over here to the Green Valley of Russian River Valley Vineyard.
Mm-hmm. We've had a similar experience in the Salinas Valley. There are now several plantings of Albariño, and it has a sweet spot. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the geography, but 25 miles inland. And of course, we get the extreme ocean ingress because it's a long valley that goes down past Robles. But if you're farther north, closer to Salinas, kind of 10 miles south of Salinas, your acids are just so out of whack, it's nearly impossible to make. And what I was getting to in the harvest details was talking about in 23 as a cool vintage that we actually had to delay picking because at our usual sugar numbers, our TA was around the 16, 17 range.
Wow.
And one of the ways it's very different in California, especially the central coast of California, then in Europe, is we hold acid like crazy on grapes. And it's a real thing to navigate with Albariño.
And
So something that we do, we grow Albariño side by side with Tempranillo. We just do it on slightly different slopes.
Yeah.
We grow Albariño on northeast facing slopes and Tempranillo right next to it on a south or a southwest facing slope. And they ripen within the same framework, but we're just keeping them in a slightly cooler orientated site.
Yeah. We also grow it in the same vineyard. We just pick Tempranillo later because I would like to get those tannins a little softened. And so we pick it as late as possible. But yeah, the Albariño is definitely later than Chardonnay.
The ultimate cut is where we take the portion, the 33% that we do 2 days of skin contact on before pressing. So we'll descend the grapes and put them back in bins. And we take off a few barrels of that and we barrel ferment them and age them in barrels surly. It really does beautiful things and shows a different side of Albariño, really pushing that.
it's a completely different wine. It's really just a shocker to the palate. I'm like, wow, that's something different. David and I were looking at each other going, wait, this is completely different. And that's wonderful. It's wonderful. But again, shows the versatility of the grape.
It seems to have a glycerin-like quality on the palate, the texture.
It's even more extreme because the 22 in comparison to 23, like our 22 Albariño, the usual La Marais Albariño, was extremely austere. It's probably our most austere vintage we've ever produced, where the 23 is much more lush and has a lot more fruit on it. It's wild, the difference that 7 months in barrel and that kind of slow oxidation does, probably similar to what Marimar is discussing with her cement tanks.
A question for all of you, and I'm probably going off mark for just a little bit, but it goes back to how you're achieving your particular taste. Do you grow this grape differently or not from other whites? In other words, do you have to do more leaf pulling? Or are you dropping more fruit? Is there something that goes along with this, or is this an easy grape to grow? I know on the East Coast, people do it differently depending on where they are in the latitudes.
I can tell you our framework behind it. Number one, it gets back to the history of what we actually have from plant material here in the United States. But let me just tell you what we do that's different. First of all, the internode links between buds, between nodes, is really long on most Albariño clones. We do a double cane on both sides. So we laid canes down so that we can get more shoots going up vertically, because otherwise we wouldn't have a lot of fill in the canopy. So that's something we do different. The other thing we do is the Portuguese clones have a tendency to have not only a primary set of clusters and a secondary set of clusters, but they have another set of clusters in between there. So I call them the 1.5s. And the 1.5s, if you let them hang just for a couple of days longer, they're as good as the primary clusters. So we tend to sometimes do a second pass to pick, or just wait a little bit and then pick everything at once.
Anybody else with a different experience?
For us, the picking is always toward the end. And like, for instance, in 23, which was the latest harvest in history, we picked October 6 to 20.
Oh, wow.
And and of course, we make Albariño at Torres in Spain, at the winery we have in Spain. And we have a winery also in Rias, Baixas. And the Albariño that they make there and mine are so different. It's really interesting.
Fascinating.
I've been working here with this site for 11 years now, and I think initially coming in, I had made Albariño before, so I was 4 or 5 tons per acre. Let's thin this out a little bit, but because we're such a warm site, we've adjusted that a little bit. I'm looking to get as much fruit on there as I can, but I still want that canopy nice and open a little bit. So it's more about setting our cluster count on the vine. We will get rid of some of that secondary, or sometimes you get that third sort of cluster in there, because we transitioned from when I first started doing all hand picking to machine harvesting. So I think that creates a difference in how the wine presses out when you have no whole clusters. It's all machine stuff. So I think stylistically, I just feel like we want to get as much Albariño as we can, and we're picking really early anyway. I think the highest tonnage I had one year was 8 tons per acre, and that wine was delicious.
I find it to be really well adapted to the Salinas Valley. We definitely have, being west of San Andreas Fault, we've got thinner soils here. And Albariño likes a lot of the granitic sands very well. And the wind, I typically will leave all the clusters. My preference is to have more smaller clusters and smaller berries. And I find those on the outside of the plant really develop like a nice color to the grapes, nice kind of dappled skins. And those on the inside are greener. And with that variation, you get a lot more depth and complexity in the finished wine. You do need to pinpoint your pick really precisely, but if you do that, you get a lot of just like beautiful depth on that wine.
We're moving on to Marimar's wine. We're starting with your 2022 before we have the 2023. Out of curiosity, is Albariño set its feet in any other parts of the world that we're unaware of besides Spain and the U.S.?
Well, didn't it supposedly set its feet in Australia, but it was Sauvignon instead?
Yes, exactly.
It's amazing how that happens. It's happened pretty consistently throughout history.
I think with a little bit of attention, it could do wonderful things in some places of New Zealand.
I would think so.
Yeah, I would think so too.
I would say even here in Washington, like we are expanding our grape growing regions. We're still relatively young wine region dating back to the 70s, really, when it started getting more serious here. So I think we are pinpointing where do we really excel with the varietals that we're producing here in Washington. I think Albariño can do really good in cooler sites. So I think the potential here in Washington is still just being tapped, and we can have a lot more depth and interest in the Albariños that we produce in the future.
Yeah, I don't recall coming across any south of the border there in the Valle de Guadalupe in Baja California. Does anybody know?
No, but I have heard of plantings in southern Argentina,
Okay.
and then also down in the Lake District, Puerto Montt down in Chile. So a little bit is being done down in those areas, but New Zealand does have a little bit of acreage currently, but the U.S., of course, Virginia, a little bit in New Jersey, Texas has done
Yes,
some pretty
Texas has some
interesting
lovely
things.
ones, yeah.
And my buddy Chris Brunger at William Crispin uses this Pet Nat Albariño.
Oh, I've had about 4 or 5 different Pet Nat Albariños, and they are spectacular.
You were saying we're tasting through now your 2022 Marimar. Is there anything you want to drop in about your wines as we move from the 2022 to the 2023?
Sure. So that was kind of a normal harvest time. We pick the grapes September 11 to 13. And then what we do is that we gently whole cluster press it and fermented this one in just stainless steel tanks. And then we let the wine rest on the lees until bottled in March of 23. And I think that it has some tropical aromas of ripe fruit, right? A little like yellow nectarines, apricots, stone fruit, and even some pineapple and mango. I was curious if you would find that, right? And it's very zesty and aromatic, and the mouthfeel is very rich, and it's clean, but it's mineral. But I think that also has that little note of sunshine from California that Spanish Albariños do not have.
I'm finding the 2022 dramatically different from the 2023.
Absolutely. It's a little bit more sedate to me. The 23 is just dripping with acidity. But it's great. It's got a really lovely grip to it. That's really beautiful. Was it the 23 that you did with the half cement egg? And why
Correct.
did you try that? And are you happy with the results? I mean, I am.
We started with the Godello, and with just one of them, one cement egg. And we thought it really helped. And we did half of that 3 years ago with the cement egg and the stainless steel. And we thought that cement egg, we liked it better, but we now like the blend of the two. So it adds the lees circulate, right, in the cement egg. And in that, I feel that it adds some more complexity. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I tend to like whites made in cement eggs, so I'm an easy target for that. But I think that the 23 is just this big, in-your-face, lovely white wine. It's just a big, bright bounce of sunshine.
Yeah, and the smell is a bit more dramatic on the tropical fruits coming off the nose.
Oh yeah,
the 22 is exactly. It's much more sedate. That shouldn't be.
It's still a great wine.
Were the vintages so widely different, or was just the stage of development of the wines and the way you processed them?
I think that they were quite different vintages. 23 was different from anything because, of course, it was such a late vintage, so it's late harvest. And I think it was different from the 22.
Got it. Makes sense.
Ian was nodding his head on that as well.
Yeah, 22, I think what you're running into is 22 had a series of pretty extreme heat spikes. We probably would have had two before a September 11th harvest, but they continued through the month of September. And that really did torch like some of the terpenes in 22 wines. And so as extreme as 23 was in terms of extraordinarily moderate September, and we didn't really see any heat until October, 23, 22 was extremely opposite route, where we just kept getting heat domes over coastal California.
And that would extend north to Sonoma for Torres as well.
Oh, it was worse in Sonoma than it was here.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay. Well, let's hope better for 2024.
Yeah.
Talking about the extent of Albariño there on the West Coast, to what do you attribute the rate of increase in the plantings and production of Albariño amongst yourselves and your contemporaries who are also working with Albariño in your respective states?
I think, first of all, we have to go back to a little bit to history.
Please.
Prior to 1990, there's no really good evidence that Albariño was planted pretty much anywhere in the United States. We have very little written evidence on it. Sometime in the early 90s, I know of at least two people that brought suitcase clones back, one in Santa Barbara and one a little bit more in the northern Central Valley. But those were suitcase clones that did okay, but not great. And then Duarte got hold of them, cleaned them up a little bit. Foundation Plant Services got a hold of them. We got some of the very first vines that came out of some of those early suitcase clone workings. Back in 1999, they went to Duarte to be grafted and developed, and then Havens, which I don't even know, is Havens even producing anymore?
No, they I think 14, 15.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah.
So Havens planted in 99 the same Albariño that we got. We planted it in 2000. And then they produced a bottle in 2003, and first one was 2004. And so we were able to follow them for a little bit. And then we ended up getting some other clones and brought in some other plant material. But to my knowledge, there's really not much other information about Albariño or Albariño being planted to any degree in the Western United States.
During that same period, Eric Laumann was making one down here called Cambiata.
Cambiata, okay.
That was on a riper profile, but was still really nice.
Yeah, the gentleman in Santa Barbara, I don't know if anybody knows him, but Brian Babcock.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah. Shut up. Yeah.
So Brian was the one allegedly to be the first to do this. And then Marcus Bokish also was doing something in the Lodi area. But Brian really didn't like the way the Albariño was producing. And he basically pulled out most everything, but ended up giving wood material to Duarte. And that's how it made its way to us.
Isn't that fascinating?
I would attribute it the recent popularity of Albariño, and something that we certainly experienced sometime around the mid. It really took off as something that was pursued. We went through a 6 or 8 year stretch where we were making 1,600 cases and selling it out in under 3 months, which was extremely bizarre for a California winery to do. It's not in my business plan. And it's twofold. On one side, I think what Marimar was touching on is I felt that Albariño is one of the great varieties that kind of has hidden nobility, in that there's always interaction between quality of plantings, quality of winemaking, what a grape can express. And there are some great varieties that you can tend to them very well and plant them in the perfect spot, and they just have a real ceiling to how they perform. Albariño has proved that it has both a wide floor, much in the way that Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay do, where they perform across a wide variety of climates and soil types, but also a really high ceiling when planted in really nice spots. And we've been seeing that, I think, in the 80s and early 90s. We started seeing that out of Rias Baixas, and I think Albariño has become quite revered in Spain in the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
And then the second piece is that during that same, as that was occurring, Americans started really developing a taste for bright white wines, moving away from they still sell a lot of Moscato and sweet treacly wines and high diacetyl Chardonnays, but wanting those bright clean white wines that match some of the transition in the way Americans eat. And we've seen a ton of interests in our region, which really excels with those types of wines, with those bright, aromatic, citrusy, minerally wines. That seems to be what's most pursued across a lot of venues.
I think
I would agree with Ian completely.
I think it's a versatile wine as a winemaker, but it's also a versatile wine when you're drinking it. You can sip it, but it's also a great food wine. I think is something that we haven't talked about yet. It's got that great acidity. It goes with so many different things. It matches well, and it's an easy crowd pleaser in so many different ways. And it does stand out. It gives you something that at this point is still something unusual that you can offer a guest that's not Chardonnay, that's not Sauvignon Blanc, that has a little different profile to it. And I think that's what makes it such a wonderful grape.
A point of nobility to Albariño, whether it's implicit or explicit. One measurement, the benchmark for what makes a great wine, for better or for worse, is its age-worthiness, is ageability. Albariño is not really known for that. It is a wine that is best known for immediate or near immediate consumption, with relatively few exceptions. I think we know what those exceptions are. I'm sure some of you have also made wines that have aged to a small cadre of your followers. But what might be the motivating factors with Albariño maintaining its niche and a wine that you can buy at a reasonable price, and it's going to serve all things in a couple of years from the vintage, but people don't think about aging it? And is that because the expectation level is there, or is it because that the world is already filled with way too many other white grape varieties that people expect to age and they're willing to pay more for it? What's going into why we seem to be locked in or on Albariños of this type and this style, or is it just merely expectations and we haven't given it a chance?
I've tasted Albariños aged in Spain, 10 or more years old, and frankly, I don't like them as much as the fresh, lively, mineral versions, which are younger. And of course, they're vinified differently, and like you say, some are in oak and such. But I don't know. To me, I like the one we make, which is fresh and mineral.
Greg, do you keep a library of your wines?
I don't know if we a library of Albariños. Mostly we keep a library for the Chardonnays and Pinot Noir.
Greg, do you guys?
I'm going to contradict Miramar's point. I think by and large, she's correct. And one is a function of winemaking and one's a function of expectation. We just even this spring dove into our library and pulled 11s, 13s, and 16s. And the 13 especially was fantastically complex and really deep and beautiful and in perfect condition. The 16 was still young and working on maturing. Some of what we run into is Albariño has that initial summer after release, especially our tank fermented Albariño, has an initial burst of vivacity where really just the aromatics jump out of the glass, that freshness, that liveliness really carries it. And then sometime around October, November, it starts to deaden. It goes through the initial primary phase and it falls off. And we've even had some of our distributors tell us, like, we didn't sell it then, and then it really just got muted. And I think we think it's done, going back to that self-fulfilling prophecy. But us having worked with it for now 13 years, just wait, guys. Give it about 6-8 months, and then crack one and let me know what you think. And it flips around, and you hit the secondary phase, and that's a much longer extended phase. Certainly, like the 13 hasn't hit its tertiary phase yet.
So what you're arguing is that it has a dumb phase in between its bookended better phases.
With that particular vineyard, I do think that there's a difference between an Albariño on that calcareous soil. We get the thicker skins and more pectin in those skins versus an Albariño grown, as it traditionally is, on granite, which tends to be more of a sand and more of a direct, straightforward wine.
I would think with this kind of acidity, it's like a dry Riesling. The acidity should carry it through, that it could last for years in a bottle, but you folks know better than I do.
So I've gone back. I have a vertical all the way through in our library. I went back and had a 2004 not long ago, and it had gained a little color. It had lost a little vibrancy, but it was still just damn good. And I was really impressed. I don't have a lot of it, of course, and we don't make it to age, but by happenstance, it just happens to do that.
Greg, worth mentioning is that we've dove into your 2023s that you've sent, the normal and the private selection.
Yeah, we call it classic and private select.
There you go.
There you go. They were both excellent,
Nothing
just as I
normal
remember
about
them from being there. They were really fantastic.
Well, the normal is normally very good, and this is no different.
Now, so the first one is a straight stainless steel, and then the second one is with the 7-day barrel treatment.
Yeah, and we tend to harvest these somewhat close together. We have multiple different blocks across our vineyard. As I said, we have 13 acres, and from these different blocks, we've decided which ones really fit the programs. And we tend to harvest somewhere between the 15th and 25th of September. Free was right in that window for both the private select and the classic. We tend to shoot for 21 to 23 bricks, but always ends up 8, 9, even close to 10 grams per liter TA. And it's just a real, even on the crush pad, you can tell Albariño from virtually any other white wine. It just dances differently all the way through the process.
And with your barrel
Right,
first.
Sorry, I heard you mention about Riesling, the similarity to Riesling. The story that I heard in Galicia, that Galicians will tell you with a serious face that was the origin of Riesling. And via the Camino de Santiago, right? But Riesling traveled to Galicia. That Albariño traveled to Germany, and there it became Riesling. With a straight face. Yep.
Turning.
I'll believe almost anything on the Camino.
Galicians are by nature very talkative and they love stories, and it's really quite a different regions from the rest of Spain.
With the barrel program, are you using new second or third use or neutral oak or a combination?
Actually, this is acacia wood, so it's not oak. And we have juggled the volume and time that it spends in oak. We typically take the entire production of the private selection, about 20% of it will go into the acacia barrels, and it will stay there anywhere from 5 to 15 days, and then it'll be racked off and put in with the stainless, and then allowed to finish out in the stainless. And so it doesn't take very much. We actually think a few years ago that leaving it for longer than 10 days, 2 weeks was too much, because it took away some of the vibrancy of the wine.
Right.
But we're still figuring that out. I don't know. What do you guys think of the private select?
Oh no, I think it's lovely, because I think the wood definitely rounds out a certain portion of that fruit, and then you add it back with all that vibrancy of the stainless steel, and now you've got a little bit more complicated wine. Like with the cement egg and the stainless steel, again, you're taking a tool and using it, and I think it only makes it more complex and more delicious.
I concur with Carlo. I'm a fan of deftly, judiciously used acacia wood, for having first become aware of it many years ago in Istra, in part of Croatia, and their work with Malvasia over there.
Oh.
When it's done right by the better, smarter producers, it's revelatory. If you don't think Malvasia can produce a great dry wine, you have to go there to try it out.
Oh, yeah.
Now, since that time, I've come across other producers of wines of different types around the world who tinker with acacia. And again, it requires a little bit of restraint. Otherwise, you're going to get too much of a good thing. I think, Greg, here with your 2023, you're doing just fine.
Yes.
No worries there.
Yeah, no, these were...
Thank you.
What inspired the use of acacia, Greg?
My father always wanted to do that, but just didn't do much to make it happen. And then one year, a gentleman from Cooperage came to him and said that they were starting to make acacia barrels. My dad said, "Damn it, I'm going to do it." It was just something he wanted, and he finally got the opportunity, and we've done it ever since.
Are they small format, large format?
It's a standard barrel format. And what we do, we produce about 2,000 to 2,200 cases per year. And this private selection is only about 300 or so cases of that production. So it's a different price point, and we don't release it out to the major distributor market. So it's meant to be more for our wine club and our tasting room too.
Hey, Greg, I'm interested. What do you do with those acacia barrels after? So if you're only going a week to 2 weeks, is that the only use you have for them?
That's the only use.
Wow.
Clean them, seal them, put them away.
Right on. I did some Sauvignon Blanc a few years back in the Acacia. I think there's some interesting aspects coming off of
That
those
would.
barrels.
This has prompted me to circle back to Marimar for a second because I missed out asking her this. What informed your decision to incorporate concrete vessels into the production of your stainless steel Albariño?
Just to experiment. I think that I've tasted some wonderful white wines made in cement eggs, and we especially we have our winery in Spain. We definitely use a lot of the cement eggs, and in Galicia, in our winery in Galicia. I thought, okay, let's taste it, try it here as well.
I think it was a great idea to do that. And I thought the complexity, again, was there that you're looking for. It had vibrancy.
Good.
We have to wind down a little bit, but before we wind down completely, I think we have to make our way to Washington, go north. We have the 2022 and the 2023, but there's also something as a 2022 with the CA marked at the top. What does that CA indicate?
That's our concrete fermented. I joined this company back in 2013, and they had planted Albariño in 2006 and 2011. So we have two different blocks. It's the same clone. I think further exploration of the varietal is some clonal selection things to see what else we could do with this varietal. But we're on the same clone at this point. And basically, the stainless steel Albariño is what we've been making when I came on board. We were making an Albariño, and that was the way that we were doing it. I had never worked with the varietal before, but enjoyed it. So I was interested in making this wine. And I think now that I've been working with it for 10 years, we've adjusted things in the vineyards over the years.
Speaking to the sweetness that came up earlier in our conversation, I'm good there. Having had the standard 2022 and then on the concrete, there's a noticeable difference. The immediate impression of your 2022 is that there's definitely a sweet character there. Go to the concrete version, much less.
When you become a winemaker at a new winery, from my point, I don't own this company, I'm their winemaker. So you're coming in and you want to make wines that you love, express yourself, but you're also taking over from someone else. They were making an Albariño in this style before I started here. So I wanted to tweak it. I wanted to bring it more into my zone, but at the same time, I needed to respect what our clientele was enjoying.
Sure.
So really, when we added that concrete Albariño, that allowed me to say, I want this wine bone dry. That's where I think it's really going to sing, right?
Well, you certainly succeeded there. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's wonderful. Yeah. They're both very good. And I could see where the first one is a tasting room, is a tasting room pleaser, and then the second one is definitely a winemaker's version.
And I find it interesting, like the concrete, like the stainless to me just has the aromatics are more distinct and bright and rich, but I just like the concrete, the palate is so much more interesting to me. It's the length and the depth of the wine. So I also find it's really fun for me, the winemaker producer, to share these wines with our consumers, right? Here's the exact same grape that we picked on the same day and we fermented in these styles.
I think that's the fascinating thing about concrete is that it allows you to show the complexity of the wine without altering it tremendously, but it gives you that extra tool to work with.
As we wrap it up here, I'd like to hear from you all about what both typical and atypical food pairings that you've enjoyed with your Albariños.
I was thinking when you mentioned earlier food pairings, to me it's ideal with tapas, of course, and with sushi and Asian cuisine, but really with any fish and definitely by itself.
Here in Washington, we're two states, right? Eastern Washington and Western Washington. The East is seafood heaven. It's rainy. There's trees and everything, right? Where we're making all this wine in the East is dry and desert. It's great with tapas. I push the seafood aspect because we have great fresh seafood here. I find like salmon can be a difficult fish to pair with because it's so strong. But I find art works really well with salmon in a lot of occasions.
The acidity cuts through that fat for sure.
And the spicy foods, I think it's great that especially the stainless one that I do that has a little more residual sugar. Yeah, you get that with a spicy curry and it doesn't taste sweet anymore. Right now you're getting the fruit.
Justin, just a suggestion. We really like our Albariño with salmon tacos that have a hint of spice and a kind of lime chili coleslaw on it.
Yeah.
That is ideal for salmon. But I also really like it with Dungeness crab, here off the coast, doing it with a remoulade sauce and kind of takes the sweetness and the spiciness, and the wine just goes boom in your mouth.
Any raw seafood, right?
Yeah,
And of course, I was referring to smoked salmon. That's really what I meant. I think it's really well with smoked salmon, with crab and.
I had to plug my computer in, but there's
There you go.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
the Dolia. It's 26 hectoliters, about 340 gallons. I blend just a touch of that concrete into the stainless, but we do about 120 cases of the concrete in.
Very cool.
Cool.
And it's not bad with a cheese plate either. To go back to the mundane, it's fantastic with cheeses because, again, that acidity cuts into all that fat and you get a good balance as you're tasting.
It depends on the cheeses, I would say, but with some cheeses, it really would be very nice.
For us, we're consistently in search of our local terroir as such a robust farming region. And a lot of the crops that are grown here, Brussels sprouts, artichokes, asparagus, brassicas, are very difficult to pair with. But the Albariño is constantly chosen by chefs to pair with those crops, both because there's that slightly green, jasmine-y note that does match up well with those foods. And then there's that cleanse and that brightness and that cleansing acidity. Also you see a lot of chefs in this region harvesting seaweed from the kelp forests in the bay. Cool. And the Albariño in those seaweed dishes, as seaweed as a garnish, as a flavor, really performs well with that. And when you're looking at the abalone, the rockfish, the petrale sole that comes out of our bay here, it's such a perfect match for that as well.
Matt, going back to the cheese comment, I think one cheese that goes beautifully with it is the Galician tetilla. Tetilla, which has, as you probably know, has the shape of a cow's tit, right? That's what it's called, which means little teat, right?
Yes.
And I love that cheese, especially in Spain, because when I've tasted it here as well, and it tends to be a little older. But the fresh tetilla is fantastic with Albariño.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you all for that. And so if people want to find your wines, they can go, of course, directly to your websites. I believe, why don't you each of you say your various websites? So because if I try, I might get one of them wrong.
Okay, so our website is Marimar Estate. So it's MARI, yes, TATE.com, estate.
Very good. Ours is just simply Abacela.com, ABACELA.
Our website is ibrandwinery.com. I like my ego and brand with no T.
And ours is Coyote Canyon Winery.com.
Crazy. And of course, many of your wines are distributed in various states. Are all of you curious? Available in New York State in some way or fashion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everybody but Coyote
We
Canyon.
ship there.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're not. Yeah.
All right. We're listening to people, strangely enough, from all over the world in bits and bobs, as the British would say. Listen, thank you all for joining Drinking on the Edge. A little plug for our co-host, Carlo DeVito. He's got a new book out called How to Drink Wine, a very basic wine. Lovely packaging. Carlo brought a copy as a reminder.
I have a whole section on Albariño in the book, so I'm a big fan of Albariño. I think it's one of the great new grapes that are being discovered in America.
There you go.
Absolutely.
So, everyone, thank you all very much for joining Drinking on the Edge. Tasting your Albariños was a great revelation. I'm so glad to see this grape variety I watched grow early in my career in Spain to reach across the waters, do so well in my native U.S. I wish you all continued success with your Albariños and more, because you all do more than just Albariño.
Great wines. Just really a great tasting this evening. Great stuff.
Thank you very much.
Carlo and David, thank you for your time.